Hello, everyone. My name is Jana Rodriguez, and today I will be presenting in regards to the Abu Ghraib scandal. The three main concepts that we'll be focused on are what is the Abu Ghraib scandal, why is it important, and what does it have to do with justice? What is the Abu Ghraib scandal? It was a scandal that occurred at the prisons during the Iraq War where people who were held in custody were abused by American soldiers from the years 2003 until 2006. Based off the image placed on the right, we can see the actions that have occurred throughout the scandal. Members of the United States Army violated human rights as well as war crimes by using torture abuse towards these prisoners. When we think about its importance, the significance was held in 1950 when the prisons was opened as a maximum security prison with torture. This highlights that the prisoners who were held at custody were extremely dangerous and needed to be watched 24/7. Besides being tortured, they had filthy living conditions and weekly orders which demanded to kill. The prisons was used by Saddam Hussein and later held by the United States to hold political prisoners. Why did this scandal occur in the first place? Secretary Rumsfeld initiated the abuses, such as the tortures, which he wanted to step up the hunt for actionable intelligence among the prisoners. He wanted them to be able to know how to deal with situations at hand if it was to come down to it. So he basically wanted to put them in situations where they felt uncomfortable in, or situations where they were tortured, there was abuse, just so they can see the worst, so that way when the worst comes down to them, they're able to handle it. Was there any consequences or punishments given? Below I've listed actions that have occurred and the way it was resolved throughout these times. For instance, in the first point, it shows how a handful of men who were found to be part of the Abu Ghraib scandal and who have committed crimes were not charged but were punished. In the second bullet, a man was sentenced to a year in prison for witnessing an act and snapping pictures instead of stopping the mistreatment. The third point shows the punishment of another individual known as Santos Cardona, who worked in the prisons as an army dog holder and used his dogs to threaten the people held at custody. Because of this, he was sentenced to 90 days hard labor and a reduction of rank. He must also forfeit $600 of pay per month for a year. Following the consequences and punishments, many reports were made due to these acts in the prisons. Antonio Taguba was a general in the United States Army who spoke on what exactly occurred. Many of these acts are horrifying to hear, but this was reality for these individuals. We were all aware that they punched, slapped, kicked, and even jumped on the naked feet of these detainees. But what we were not aware of was that they forced detainees to remove their clothing and kept them naked for several days. They forced groups of male detainees to masturbate themselves while being photographed and videotaped. They arranged naked male detainees in a pile and then jumped onto them. They also made them write "I am a rapist" on their leg and accused them of rape and then photographed them while being naked. All in all, they used military working dogs to intimidate and frighten these detainees, leaving them severely injured. Donald Rumsfeld, who we have mentioned before as the secretary who initiated the abuses in the Iraq War, has been one to support this act tremendously. He was personally responsible for authorizing the use of torture that occurred at the Abu Ghraib prison. In the previous slide, we was able to note the reaction of a person who was supportive towards this act, while in this slide, we have explained and have shown someone who is against this act, known as the U.S. President George Washington Bush. On May 5th, 2004, he had been found expressing his thoughts and feelings on this type of behavior. He was disgusted at the mistreatment that these detainees had to go through, as you can see in the picture below. When we think of how did detainees feel, we also think about how are they not supposed to feel. These prisoners were beaten, sexually assaulted, humiliated, and filmed every night, every day, without anybody stopping them, without anybody trying to help them. Many abuses remained hidden after they released out the prison. And this is because they were scared. They were scared of being rejected. They were scared of not being heard. They were scared of being mistreated, just as bad as they was being mistreated when they was inside the prisons. An example being that a former prisoner had mentioned that they heard women being raped every night, but little was heard from these women because they were scared of being rejected or people thinking they're lying. People might be wondering, as well as you guys, as to what happened to the remaining of the prisoners. In October 2002, Donald Rumsfeld, known as the secretary who initiated the abuses in the Abu Ghraib scandal, sent out all of his apologies to most prisoners in Iraq. When I say most prisoners, I'm referring to the prisoners who are still kept and held inside of these prisons. After the prisoners were released, the prisons were left empty due to it being vandalized and looted. Almost all of the documents and paperwork relating to these prisoners were burnt and piled inside prison's office and cells, leaving no evidence. How did the Abu Ghraib scandal eventually get exposed? In 2004, a soldier who worked for the U.S. force known as Joe Darby aired out the actions that were occurring in these prisons. He worked with soldiers who were actually placed in the Abu Ghraib prison to take pictures which were let out on the CBS News. These pictures show naked prisoners stacked up into a pyramid, being forced to stimulate sexual acts and poses. Because of the Abu Ghraib scandal, many things occurred. Because of the scandal, the administration of Bush was completely destroyed because not enough pressure was being initiated to terminate these abuses towards these mistreatments that were being held in these prisons. Because of these types of behavior, a war was created in Iraq, where many dictatorships have shown their loyalty and true colors towards the United States regarding their fight. How is justice involved? When we think of justice, we think of fairness and doing right by people. In this case, justice tags along because of the background of this scandal and what people had to go through. Many prisoners were getting harshly mistreated, such as getting beaten, tortured, raped, and not being able to speak up because they feared losing their lives. This violates many violations, including our rights to speaking up and the rights we carry as individuals, especially in taking advantage of the power one has over another. In this case, the soldiers carried too much power over the prisoners, which led them to feel inferior to them. Before wrapping up my presentation, in this slide as well as the next slide, I have included citations on what I've used throughout my PowerPoint. In this slide, I have noted articles such as the BBC.com, which is the second option, and the CNN.com, which is the first option. Both articles basically just sum up about what the Abu Ghraib scandal was. Lastly, these are citations of videos that you will be able to see, such as the violence that have occurred in these prisons, what was actually going on in these prisons during the Abu Ghraib scandal, and you just will be able to tell and see the type of behavior that was accepted in the past and shouldn't continue in present day. To wrap up, I just want to thank you guys for listening to my presentation and the information that I have gathered on the Abu Ghraib scandal. I hope that as you guys, my audience, have learned and picked up information that has stood out to you, information that can help you grow and see the struggles and mistreatments that people have to go through on an everyday basis and choose to stay shut because of fear, because they're scared to be judged, because they're scared that nobody is listening to them. And I just hope that you guys can speak up for people who aren't able to speak up for themselves, be the power of their voices, just be there for them. Helping someone out will always be better than being a bystander and just watching. Your voice matters, and so do others.